Claire was a quiet college sophomore, known for her good grades and her gentle patience with children. She often babysat for families in her small suburban town to earn extra cash. When the Johnsons called her one Friday evening, asking if she could watch their 6-year-old daughter Emily while they attended a late dinner party, she agreed without hesitation. The Johnsons' house was older than most in the neighborhood. It stood tall, with steep, narrow gables, its windows like black, watchful eyes in the night. When Claire stepped inside, she felt a faint chill, though the heater was humming softly. The parents gave her the usual instructions: Emily's bedtime at 9, snacks in the fridge, emergency numbers on the counter. But as Mrs. Johnson put on her coat, she hesitated, then added, "Claire, Emily sometimes says things. She has a vivid imagination. Don't let it scare you." Claire smiled politely, thinking of imaginary friends and ghost stories children often invented. But Mrs. Johnson's eyes lingered on her a second too long, as if warning her of something more. The night began quietly. Claire and Emily played board games in the living room. The little girl giggled, her golden hair falling into her face. But every so often, she would glance toward the darkened hallway that led to the upstairs bedrooms. "Who are you looking at, sweetie?" Claire asked. Emily whispered, "The man upstairs." Claire blinked. "There's no one upstairs, Emily, just us." But the girl shook her head. "He doesn't like it when strangers come here." Later, after putting Emily to bed, Claire sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone. The house creaked as old houses do, but at times, the sound seemed deliberate. A footstep in the hallway, a door slowly shifting in its frame. She told herself not to be silly. At 9:45, the baby monitor on the coffee table crackled. Then came Emily's small, trembling voice. "Claire? He's in my room." Claire froze. "Who?" "Emily," she whispered, leaning toward the monitor. "The man upstairs," Emily said, and then the line went silent. Heart pounding, Claire grabbed a flashlight and climbed the staircase. The air grew colder with each step. Emily's bedroom door was ajar. She pushed it open slowly. Emily lay in bed, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Emily, honey, who were you talking about?" Claire asked gently. The little girl pointed to the closet. "He's inside." Claire forced a laugh. "Just your imagination." She pulled the closet door open wide. It was empty, only coats and toys. But when she turned back, Emily was sitting up, her face pale. He said, "You passed the first test." Claire felt her blood run cold. "What test?" Before Emily could answer, the bedroom lamp flickered violently and went out. The whole house sank into darkness. From inside the closet, a low, raspy voice whispered, "Final test." Claire stumbled back, pulling Emily into her arms. She bolted down the stairs, but the front door was locked with a chain she didn't remember securing. Behind her, she heard footsteps descending slowly, deliberately, as though savoring her. Fear? She grabbed her phone, but the screen flickered and died in her hand. The only light was the faint glow of the street lamp through the curtains. Emily clutched her tightly and whispered, "If you fail, he keeps you." A shadow stretched across the living room floor, tall and distorted, though no figure stood there. The air smelled of iron and damp earth. Claire's knees shook, but she pulled Emily behind the couch. "Close your eyes," Claire whispered. But Emily didn't. Instead, the child's voice seemed to shift, deeper, unfamiliar. "You did well, Claire." Most babysitters run too soon. Claire turned in horror. Emily's innocent blue eyes had turned pitch black. Her lips curled into a smile far too wide for her small face. "You're the final test," the girl said in a voice that wasn't hers at all. The lights blazed suddenly as the Johnsons' car pulled into the driveway. Claire gasped, but when she looked again, Emily was just a normal little girl, yawning, rubbing her eyes. "Did you play a game while we were gone?" Mrs. Johnson asked casually when they entered. Claire could not speak. She only stared at the child who now looked perfectly harmless. Emily waved and whispered softly, almost too quiet to hear, "See you next time, Claire." It was late at night when Jenna, a young nurse, finished her shift at the hospital. The streets were nearly empty, the faint glow of streetlights reflecting off puddles from an earlier rain. She had taken this route countless times, but tonight, something felt off. As she approached a familiar intersection, a detour sign forced her onto a narrow, twisting road she had never seen before. The sign read, "Detour ahead, road closed." Jenna hesitated. Her GPS insisted to follow the detour, though the road seemed deserted and the darkness pressed in from all sides. She gripped the steering wheel tighter and started down the winding path. At first, the detour seemed harmless, just another stretch of unfamiliar road, but soon, the trees grew closer together, their branches scraping the sides of her car, leaving streaks of shadow across the windshield. The fog thickened, curling around the headlights, and she realized she couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. Then she noticed it, a large, dark truck, seemingly abandoned, parked sideways across the lane ahead. Jenna slowed, heart hammering. The truck didn't move, didn't have lights on. She passed cautiously, only to notice it appearing again a few minutes later, this time in her rearview mirror. Her stomach churned. She pressed the accelerator, trying to shake the vehicle, but the fog seemed to swallow every turn she took. And then she heard the first sound, the engine behind her, low, growling, relentless. The truck was following her. Panic rose as Jenna tried to call the police, but her phone had no signal. Every turn she made, every attempt to speed up, the truck was there, its headlights like predator eyes. The road seemed endless, looping back on itself in ways that didn't make sense. Then came the first honk, sharp, deliberate, echoing through the trees. Jenna slammed on her brakes. The truck stopped too, just yards behind her. She could see movement, now something large, almost humanoid, behind the windshield, watching her. Jenna knew she had to escape. She remembered an old gas station sign she'd passed hours ago. Maybe it was minutes. Time felt twisted on this road. She swerved toward it, praying it still existed. But as she turned the corner, the path split into two roads, both disappearing into dense fog. She didn't know which way to go, and then she saw it, another detour sign, glowing faintly in the mist, pointing left, as if mocking her. She obeyed, heart pounding, but the truck followed relentlessly. Every so often, she caught glimpses of the driver, tall, hunched, face hidden in shadow. She screamed, praying it was just a truck, but the way it moved, it wasn't natural. It felt deliberate, like it knew exactly where she was going. Finally, in a desperate gamble, Jenna veered off the road entirely, plunging down a muddy slope into an old forest path. Trees scraped the roof of the car, branches breaking the windows. Her breath was ragged, her hands slick with sweat. She thought she lost it. But a sudden crash made her spin in terror. The truck had appeared behind her again, out of nowhere, blocking the exit from the forest. The engine growled louder, almost alive. Jenna slammed her foot on the gas, driving straight toward the truck. The sound of metal screeching and glass shattering filled the night. And then she woke up. Hours later, Jenna found herself in her own bed, sunlight streaming through the curtains. Her car was parked in the driveway, untouched, but on her dashboard was a note, smeared with mud and blood. Next time, don't take the detour. She never drove that route again. Some nights, she swears she can hear the growl of an engine outside her window, long after the world has gone silent. It was a bright Saturday morning when Alex and his girlfriend, Mia, decided to hike through Redstone Canyon. The sun sparkled off the jagged cliffs, and the wind carried the scent of dry earth and pine. They were experienced hikers, confident in their gear and their instincts. The trail started easy, winding gently through scrub and rock formations. Birds called from the cliffside, and a small stream gurgled nearby. Alex took the lead, camera in hand, eager to capture the natural beauty. Mia followed, scanning the rock faces for the perfect photo. About an hour into the hike, the canyon narrowed. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the trail, despite the bright sun overhead. Alex slowed, noticing a figure on a ridge above them. At first, he thought it was another hiker, standing perfectly still. But the figure didn't move, didn't wave, and its proportions seemed wrong. Too tall, too thin, limbs bending at impossible angles. "Did you see that?" Alex whispered to Mia. Mia squinted. Probably just someone ahead, maybe a park ranger or another hiker. But as they moved forward, the figure shifted not in a natural walk, but in jerking, sudden movements, almost like it was sliding along the rocks. Every time they stopped, it stopped. Every time they advanced, it advanced. The feeling of being watched grew unbearable. The canyon's echoes turned their own footsteps into ominous sounds, bouncing off the walls like whispers. Alex tried to shake off the fear. It's just a coincidence. Someone's hiking the same trail. But when they reached a narrow pass, the figure was gone. No footprints, no signs of anyone, just the rustle of wind through the canyon, and their own uneasy breathing. "Maybe it was nothing," Mia said, though her voice trembled. They pressed on, but unease gnawed at them. As the sun began to dip, casting long shadows across the rocks, the canyon seemed to stretch endlessly. Every bend revealed nothing, until they reached a small alcove. There it was again, the figure, now standing at the base of the cliff, half hidden behind a rock, but unmistakably there. Its head tilted unnaturally, watching them. Its eyes, they could be called eyes, glimmered darkly. Mia froze. "Alex, we need to leave. Now." Alex nodded. They turned, retracing their path, but the trail seemed different. Rock formations appeared where they hadn't been before. Twisting paths and dead ends trapped them in the canyon as the figure silently followed, always just out of reach, moving impossibly fast over the jagged rocks. Night fell, and with it, the canyon became a labyrinth of shadows. They called out, but their voices were swallowed by the cliffs. Flashlights revealed nothing, yet the feeling of being watched intensified. Every reflection, every shadow, seemed alive. Suddenly, a loud, cracking sound echoed from above. A boulder tumbled down, narrowly missing Alex. Heart racing, he grabbed Mia's hand. "We can't stay here. We have to climb up." They scrambled up a steep incline, rocks cutting into their hands. The figure emerged at the base, impossibly tall, in the dim light, its limbs bending in unnatural angles, and it made no sound, just stared, waiting. Finally, as they reached the canyon rim, the trees welcomed them back into the relative safety of the forest. They didn't look back until the trail opened into the parking lot. The figure was gone. Even weeks later, Alex couldn't shake the image of the figure. Sometimes, in the corner of his eye, he thought he saw it on city streets, in the reflection of windows, or standing silently at a distance in the woods. The canyon hadn't released them, and he feared it never would. Maya had always considered herself careful. She double-checked the locks on her apartment door, kept her pepper spray in her bag, and never walked home alone at night. So when she bought a new set of wireless headphones, she thought nothing of it, just another piece of tech to make life easier. That night, after unboxing them, she paired the headphones with her phone. Everything worked fine. But the next morning, as she prepared to leave for work, a strange notification flashed across her screen. "Unknown AirTag detected near you." This AirTag has been moving with you. Maya froze. She didn't own an AirTag. At first, she brushed it off. Maybe a coworker's device had triggered it, or maybe it was just a glitch. But as she rode the subway, her phone buzzed again. The same warning appeared, only this time, it included a map. Her stomach dropped. The map showed a red dot that mirrored her every move from her apartment, to the subway, to the street near her office. Someone was tracking her. That night, she tore through her purse, her jacket, her backpack. Nothing. No AirTag. Yet the notification returned as soon as she started walking home. Each time, it told her the AirTag had been with her for hours. Maya's sleep grew restless. Every sound in her apartment felt amplified. The hum of the refrigerator, the groan of old pipes, and beneath it all, she swore she could hear something faint, a subtle beeping sound, almost too quiet to notice. By the third night, paranoia consumed her. She stripped her belongings up her emptying drawers, turning pockets inside out, even dismantling the headphones. Nothing. But when she turned off the lights, her phone lit up with a new alert. AirTag detected nearby. Battery critically low. Her heart pounded. That meant whoever planted it had been tracking her for days. Desperate, Maya contacted the police. They listened politely, but shrugged. Probably a glitch, they said, or someone just left an AirTag on the subway. But Maya knew better. She could feel it. That night, she tried a different route home, weaving through side streets and alleys. Yet, when she checked her phone, the red dot followed every twist, every turn, like a predator closing in on its prey. Her pace quickened. She could hear footsteps behind her, soft, deliberate, too perfectly matched to hers. She spun around. The street was empty. But when she looked down at her screen, the AirTag signal was stronger than ever. At home, she tore apart her apartment, moving furniture, checking vents, pulling clothes from closets. Hours passed. Nothing. Finally, exhausted, she collapsed onto her couch. Then dash beep. It was faint, but unmistakable. The sound came from inside her bedroom wall. Her blood ran cold. With shaking hands, she pressed her ear to the plaster. There it was, again, beep, beep, beep. The AirTag wasn't in her bag. It wasn't in her clothes. It was inside the wall. She hardly slept. When morning came, she called her landlord, begging him to send maintenance. He reluctantly agreed. That afternoon, a worker came by with tools, knocking through the plaster. Dust filled the air as he pried open a section of the wall. Inside was an old crawl space, dark, narrow, barely wide enough for a person. And there, lying on the wooden beams, was a small white AirTag. Its surface was scratched, worn, and sticky, as if it had been handled repeatedly. The maintenance worker frowned. That's weird. How did it even get in here? Maya didn't answer. She was too busy staring at the space beyond. In the dust, clear as day, were handprints. Fresh ones, as if someone had been crawling through her walls. Terrified, she took the AirTag to the police, demanding answers. They promised to investigate, but weeks passed with no follow-up. She tried to move on, but the paranoia clung to her. Every creak of her apartment sounded like someone shifting inside the walls. Every time her phone buzzed, her heart stopped. And then, one night, as she was drifting off to sleep, her phone lit up on the nightstand. Unknown AirTag detected near you. The red dot blinked steadily. This time, it wasn't following her on the streets. It was inside her apartment. It started as a casual weekend trip for friends, all in their early 20s, driving upstate to explore the trails of Blackwood Forest. The place had a reputation for being haunted, but they laughed it off. Ghost stories were just a way to keep kids from wandering too far, right? By late afternoon, the group found themselves deep in the woods. The trees seemed thicker here, the canopy blotting out most of the sun. The air was unnaturally still, heavy, as though the forest itself was holding its breath. That was when Ethan, the most adventurous of the group, suggested they split up to cover more ground. "We'll meet back at the clearing in half an hour," he said, flashing his trademark grin. The others hesitated, but eventually agreed. Half an hour passed, then an hour. Ethan never came back. At first they thought he was pulling a prank. They shouted his name, their voices bouncing strangely among the trees, coming back distorted like someone else was calling their names. When night began to fall, panic set in. They tried to retrace their steps, but the deeper they went, the less the forest made sense. Landmarks, they swore they had just passed an uprooted tree. A mossy boulder appeared again and again, as though the forest was folding in on itself. And then they started hearing footsteps, not from one direction, but from all around them, pacing just out of sight. Sometimes it sounded like Ethan's laugh, faint and warped, carried on the wind. Other times it was a whisper, words they couldn't understand, but spoken in Ethan's voice. By midnight, their phones had all died simultaneously, even though some had been fully charged. With no light but their flashlights, they stumbled forward, calling out desperately. That's when Sarah screamed. Her beam had landed on something hanging from the branches. At first, it looked like a bundle of clothes, but as they drew closer, they saw it clearly. Ethan's backpack, shredded open, dangling from a rope of twisted vines. Inside was his phone, the screen cracked and black, but still faintly glowing, with a single notification. Shared location, Blackwood Forest. The map pin pulsed faintly, right where they were standing. The next morning, the three remaining friends finally emerged from the forest, pale and trembling. Search parties scoured the area for weeks. No trace of Ethan was ever found, but sometimes, hikers still report strange things in Blackwood Forest. A voice calling out for help. A figure glimpsed just between the trees. And once, a man swore. His phone buzzed with a notification. Shared location. Ethan wants to share his location with you. No one's seen Ethan since that night, but the forest hasn't forgotten him, and if you go there, it won't forget you either. It started like any other late night at the office. The building was nearly empty, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly as Maya typed furiously, trying to finish a report before the morning deadline. The only other person left on the floor was Daniel, her quiet, almost too friendly coworker. He leaned over the partition of her cubicle. "You're here late. Again," he said with a crooked smile. Maya forced a laugh. "Yeah, well, deadlines don't care about sleep." Daniel tilted his head. "Come with me. I found something interesting in the storage room." She frowned. Daniel wasn't exactly the social type. Still, curiosity and politeness won over hesitation. She followed him down the dim corridor, past darkened offices, until they reached the storage room at the end of the hall. Inside, the fluorescent lights flickered weakly, casting shadows that seemed to stretch unnaturally along the walls. "What is it you wanted to show me?" Maya asked. Daniel closed the door behind them. The click of the lock echoed far too loud. Her stomach tightened. There was nothing unusual in the room, just shelves of old files, boxers, broken monitors. But Daniel stepped closer, too close. "I always wondered if anyone would notice if you were gone." Maya's blood turned to ice. She laughed nervously, trying to push past him, but his arm shot out, blocking the door. His smile widened. From his pocket, he pulled something that made her knees nearly buckle. A keycard, but not the standard office one. It was black, unmarked. "There are rooms in this building that don't show up on the blueprints," he whispered. "I found one." Before she could scream, he shoved her through a panel in the wall that opened like a hidden door. They stumbled into darkness. The smell hit her first. Damp concrete, rust, and something metallic like old blood. Daniel flicked on a single hanging bulb, its light swinging in lazy circles. The room wasn't an office at all. The walls were bare concrete, lined with chains bolted into the floor. On the far side sat a rusted chair, straps dangling from its arms. Her heart pounded against her ribs. Daniel, what the hell is this? He tilted his head, studying her the way someone might study an insect. A trap, for people like you, for people who never notice me. Her voice broke. Please, this isn't funny. But he only grinned. Who said I was joking? Maya lunged for the door, but the hidden panel had already sealed shut. She clawed at the wall, fingers scraping raw against concrete. Behind her, Daniel whispered her name, over and over, like a chant. Maya, Maya, Maya. And then, the light bulb snapped out. Total darkness. She heard his footsteps circling her, slow, deliberate, a whisper close to her ear. No one will hear you down here. Her scream was swallowed by the silence of the underground room. The next morning, her desk was empty. Her computer still logged in, the report unfinished. No one questioned it much. People quit jobs all the time, right? But every now and then, employees working late say they hear something. A faint tapping from inside the walls. Sometimes, a woman's muffled sobs, and if you walk past the storage room at night, you might see a faint light beneath the door. Daniel doesn't work there anymore. In fact, no one remembers hiring him at all. The game had ended hours ago. The once roaring stadium was now silent, the crowd long gone. The echo of cheers replaced by the distant hum of the maintenance crew locking up. Ethan, a college student, stayed behind to gather equipment for his internship. He liked these quiet moments, standing in the middle of thousands of empty seats, imagining the ghosts of excitement still floating in the air. But that night, the silence felt different, too heavy, too watchful. As he bent down to zip a bag, he froze. From the corner of his eye, up in the shadowed rows of seats, he saw it, a figure, still motionless. It wasn't a security guard. Their flashlights always swept the aisles. This figure stood in complete darkness, watching. Ethan blinked, and it was gone. He shook his head, laughed nervously, told himself it was his imagination. But when he turned back toward the field, the figure was closer, now standing halfway down the stairs, still, silent. Ethan's heart pounded. "Hey," he called out, forcing confidence into his voice. "The stadium's closed. You need to leave." The figure didn't move. The lights above flickered, buzzing angrily, before plunging part of the stands into shadow. When they came back, the figure had descended 2 more steps. Ethan dropped the bag and bolted for the tunnel. His footsteps echoed in the vast, empty stadium, sounding far too loud, far too exposed. Behind him, he heard it, footsteps, slow, heavy, following the tunnel stretched on forever. Each door he tried was locked. His breath grew ragged, panic scraping at his throat. Finally, he reached the locker rooms. He slipped inside, slamming the door shut and pressing his back against it. Silence, then thud, a single knock on the door. He held his breath. Thud, thud, thud. The knocks grew louder, angrier, until the metal hinges groaned, and then, silence again. Ethan crept toward the far exit, praying it would be unlocked. He reached for the handle and froze. In the reflection of the metal door, he saw it. The figure was already inside, tall, featureless, a shadow wearing the faint outline of a mask. Like a permanent grin carved across its face, it didn't move. It just stood there, inches behind him. The lights snapped off. Total darkness swallowed the room. Ethan screamed, fumbling for the door, pounding it with his fists. The sound of footsteps drew closer, slow and deliberate, circling him in the dark. Then, a whisper. "You shouldn't have stayed late." The last thing he felt was a cold hand brushing the back of his neck. The next morning, the stadium reopened for another game. Fans filed in, laughing, cheering, unaware. Ethan's belongings were found neatly stacked near the field. But Ethan himself was never seen again. Still, some say that if you linger in the stadium after dark, you'll feel it, the weight of unseen eyes from the stands. And sometimes, when the crowd goes silent between plays, a faint whisper threads through the air. "You shouldn't have stayed late." The fortress stood on the edge of a cliff, black against the blood-red sunset. Once a stronghold of power, it had long been abandoned, its stones weathered, its gates sagging. Locals whispered that no one who entered after dark ever came back. The same Lena, a history graduate student, didn't believe in curses. She only believed in artifacts, forgotten knowledge, and the lure of discovery. So, when she heard rumors of medieval tunnels and lost manuscripts beneath the fortress, she ignored the warnings. Armed with only a flashlight and a recorder, she entered just before dusk. The air inside was damp, thick with mold. Every step echoed, bouncing back at her in strange, distorted ways, as if the walls themselves were mimicking her movements. She paused, shining her light across the stone hall. Dust swirled, forming shapes that almost looked like faces. She told herself it was just her imagination, but when she replayed the recording later, her own footsteps were not the only sound. There were others, footsteps walking slightly out of sync with hers. Deeper in, Lena found a grand hall, the remains of a throne crumbling at the far end. Carvings along the walls depicted battles, but the figures were wrong. Their faces were blurred, stretched, mouths wide as if frozen in screams. She raised her flashlight and nearly dropped it. The carvings had changed. Now, instead of warriors, the stone figures looked like people pressed against the walls, palms out, mouths agape, like they had been trapped inside the stone. Her pulse quickened. She whispered into the recorder, possible hallucination caused by lack of light, or something else. And then, clear as day, another voice whispered back on the recording, "Leave." The temperature plummeted. Her breath fogged the air. She spun, light shaking, and saw a shadow dart across the hall. She tried to chase it, only to find herself in a corridor that hadn't been there before. The fortress was changing around her. The walls stretched, corridors twisting, doors vanishing. Every path led deeper, not out. And the echoes, they grew louder. Her footsteps returned to her multiplied, dozens, maybe hundreds. As if she were not alone, but surrounded by an unseen crowd. In one chamber, she discovered rusted armor, still standing upright, as if soldiers had been petrified mid-guard. She reached out, brushing her fingers across a helmet. A scream filled the room. The visor snapped open, empty inside. Yet the helmet screamed again, a shrill, piercing sound that tore through her skull. She fled. But the fortress wasn't done with her. Her flashlight flickered, batteries draining too fast. In the strobing light, she glimpsed things, figures crawling along the ceiling. Limbs too long, faces hidden by masks of stone, hands sliding out from cracks in the walls, reaching every time the light went out. They came closer. Every time it flared back, they froze, just inches away. Lena sobbed, voice trembling into the recorder. This fortress, it doesn't echo the past. It devours the present. At last, she found a staircase spiraling downward. Some instinct told her that below was an exit. She descended, the echoes chasing her, the voices growing clearer. They weren't whispers anymore. They were screams. Dozens of voices cried out at once, begging, pleading, cursing. The air pressed down, suffocating, as if the fortress itself breathed around her. And then she saw them, pale faces lining the walls, eyes rolled back, mouths stretched open wide, each one mouthing the same word in unison: stay. Her flashlight died. Darkness swallowed everything, and in that pitch-black void, Lena felt fingers grip her arms, her legs, her throat. Her last scream echoed endlessly, joining the others. Weeks later, hikers found Lena's recorder near the fortress gates. It was cracked, the battery dead, but one file remained intact. The recording began with her calm notes about architecture, but in the final minutes, the sounds were unbearable. Lena screaming, the roar of countless voices shrieking with her, and then silence, except for one final whisper, so faint it barely registered: "We echo forever." Salt Lake City was supposed to be quiet. Tree-lined streets, white picket fences, children laughing as they played in front yards. It was the kind of neighborhood where doors were left unlocked, and neighbors waved to each other every morning. But peace ended when house number 23 was sold. At first it was nothing but small annoyances. Music blasting at 3 a.m., metallic banging from inside the garage that shook the walls of the next-door houses. When a few neighbors politely asked him to keep it down, the man who lived there only stared at them, a long, silent stare, his eyes too still, his lips twitching into something that wasn't quite a smile. Nobody could ever remember him saying a word. Then the neighborhood began to change. Letters appeared in mailboxes, written in jagged handwriting. "I see you when you sleep." Deep scratches were carved into front doors, spelling out, "Leave or bleed." Doorbells rang furiously at midnight, but when the families opened their doors, the street was empty, except for the faint echo of someone's laughter. One family installed cameras. The footage made them wish they hadn't. At 2:37 a.m., the man from House 23 appeared on the screen. He didn't move. He just stood outside the camera's view, half his face visible, watching the house for over 2 hours. Sometimes his lips moved, whispering something to the dark. When the father replayed the footage with headphones, his blood ran cold. The whisper was his daughter's name, over and over. Soon the terror grew physical. Pets disappeared. Children woke up screaming, saying there was someone standing at their window. One morning, Mrs. Jenkins found her beloved dog strung up on her fence, its throat slit, blood soaking the grass beneath. The police came. They questioned the man at House 23, but he only smiled, tilting his head, before walking back inside. "No evidence," the officers said. That night, Mrs. Jenkins swore she saw him standing in her yard again, holding something dripping in his hand. The violence escalated. Windows smashed in the middle of the night. Threatening notes slid under doors. Mr. Thomas, the neighbor across the street, chased a figure off his lawn and found a piece of paper nailed to his door. Scrawled in black ink were the words, "I was inside your house while you slept." Another woman nearly died when a black car sped straight at her as she parked in her driveway. She caught a glimpse of the driver. It was him. His eyes were wide, his mouth stretched in a silent scream. Salt Lake City was no longer safe. Families stopped letting their children play outside. Extra locks and chains were installed on every door. At night, the neighborhood was silent, except for that laughter. Distant, but everywhere at once. It always seemed to come from the direction of House 23, yet sometimes it sounded like it was coming from just behind the bedroom walls. The breaking point came when one family decided to move. On the morning of their departure, the street gathered to watch, envious of their escape. The moving truck rolled away, and everyone breathed a sigh of relief. But as the truck disappeared down the road, smoke began pouring out of House 23. Thick, black, choking smoke. The fire department arrived within minutes. They found no fire. The walls inside were untouched, yet one wall of the house bore a massive black stain, spreading like a burn mark. When a firefighter looked closer, his knees buckled. The stain was the shape of a human face, twisted in agony, its mouth wide open in a scream. From that night forward, the house was silent. No lights, no noises, no movement. But the neighbors swore they could still see something. A pale figure at the upstairs window, sitting in the dark, unmoving, always facing outward, always watching. Some nights, when the wind was low, you could hear it again, that thin, rasping laugh. And everyone in Salt Lake City knew one truth. You can build fences, lock doors, and run as far as you can, but when the devil is your neighbor, he never really leaves.